So, hello, Ryan, and welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here with me today. I am grateful that we're finally getting the chance to sit down and have this conversation together. Would you like to start by introducing yourself to the listeners?
Hello, Casey. Yes, my name is Ryan Anthony Hernandez. I'm originally from Los Angeles. My parents are from El Salvador. And right now, I am working on my podcast. It's called The Truth That Heals. And I got into this because I needed healing from my traumas being in a religious cult. And I just got sick and tired of being silenced, being felt, having that feeling that I needed to be ashamed of my past. And I kind of did this podcast so I can embrace, who I am and to move forward. And that's brought me here. And I'm so happy that you've allowed me to come to your show.
Oh, thanks, Ryan. That's so lovely to hear. And do you feel like your podcast is giving you those things that you were searching for in terms of deconstruction and healing when you started your platform?
I think, well, the first episodes, the first few episodes, there's like real strong language, and a lot of the other survivors, or some of them, I don't want to say all, but many of them were telling me that they really felt the pain that I was speaking of because they had gone through that. And for me, I think the best part is connecting with other survivors and building this network that we're not alone and that we shouldn't feel that we have to be silent about our experiences.
And that's quite powerful, actually, taking back your voice and using it however you want to.
It is when I hear other members telling me that I'm able to speak what they wish they could say, but I understand that many members, ex-members, are still living in fear. And another reason why I did the podcast was because when I left, my family didn't understand how to deal with me. They didn't understand how to connect. And I know that there are family members of other ex-members who don't understand their son or daughter. It's like, how come my son, my daughter, my brother, my sister, how come they went to the mission, they went for 5, 6, in my case 11 years, and then they come back and it's a totally different person. And it's like, for me, I felt like I was shell shocked. And so I understand that parents also have questions, and I wanted to give some answers to those family members because I think they deserve to know what happened.
How long ago was it when you officially left your movement?
I officially left 2015, 7 years.
Because on your social media pages, on your Twitter feed specifically, I feel as though you as an individual are in a really strange place where you're going through this deconstruction and healing process almost in real time. And typically, I think when we've spoken to people on this show, it's either immediately after they've left a group or it's been a long time since. So you're really in that place at the moment to be able to give the listeners some insight into the steps that you are taking to go through that recovery process. And I think that that's something quite special and unique. And I'm really appreciative that you're willing to come forward and share that with all of us today, Ryan. So you mentioned that your family were concerned or confused, perhaps didn't recognize you when you came home. So does that mean that this is a movement that you joined later on in life, not a movement that you were born into?
I wasn't born into it, but since it deals with Catholicism, let's say for like priests and nuns, you're not going to be born into the priesthood. You really have to make the decision to join. And before I get into all the details, um, I was recruited at the age of 17 with the idea that I'm going to be on mission, with the idea that I'm going to get a good education, and that hopefully in the future I will become a priest or do something with missionary life, missionary work, maybe help the poor somewhere. And so that kind of I was drawn to that idea of simply helping people, and I wasn't born into it, but I I was a little older. I was 16 when they started talking to me and kind of like doing that love bombing. And then that's right when I turned 17, I left high school, and all my dreams about going to university and doing all these things, I left it behind because they gave you this idea that if God is calling you now, don't delay. If you're delaying, you're disobeying God. So I left everything, and I assured my parents that I would be getting a good education as they had told me. So there was nothing to worry about. But then when I came back 11 years later, I had no education. I had no idea how to drive a car. Um, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I liked. And it was torture seeing my family. They had these hopes that I'd be coming back vibrant and charismatic and happy. But when I came back, I had my head down. I was going to the bars, just a different lifestyle from what they expected, and they didn't understand why. And it's hard to articulate and to help them understand when it's only me who's talking openly about this. So for the first few years, I had to remain silent.
So Catholicism is something that's always been a part of your life.
Yes, I was baptized Catholic. I went to Catholic school with the Salesians. It's an Italian congregation, and I went to the Salesian High School, and then I encountered this group founded by, his name is Father Bing, and it's so freaking confusing. I don't know any cult that is like simple. There's like so many layers, but like just to make it simple for the audience, I thought that this community was genuine. And like every other congregation within Catholicism, I thought that they were following the rules. And I think they were partly, especially in the beginning, but maybe 2 years after I entered, I was starting to notice a lot of obscurity, a lot of cover ups, a lot of hiding. And to kind of justify it, they would say that we're doing this for the salvation of souls. And to give my understanding, I felt that it was a legit Catholic community. But now that I'm out, I'm seeing uh, so much corruption, and it's so hard to really find one place to really start the story. Let me give you examples. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with you. We have the Jesuits. We have Franciscans. Franciscans are known for like taking care of poor areas. You have the Missionaries of Charity of Mother Teresa. So each group has a founder. So like for the Franciscans, their founder is Saint Francis of Assisi. You have the Jesuits, their founder is Saint Ignatius of Loyola. So it's still Catholicism, but they have a, what do you call it, is a charism. So let's say the charism of the Missionaries of Charity is to take care of those who are in the slums. So the founder comes up with the charism. Like the charism is a way to live out the gospel, and you simply congregate together. You take vows of chastity, poverty, and obedience, and then these communities, they start a constitution, a way of life, rules, and that has to be approved by the Vatican. And it's just a big ass process. It's a huge process, but there has to be permission like every step of the way. So in my community, the founder, his name was Father Bing, and to even get started, he needed permission from a bishop. So he got permission from a bishop, because his idea was, God, now that I'm thinking about it, it's like, what the hell was his idea? Because like it just kept on changing. But like the main idea was, I think, to go to schools and to help the poorest of the kids in schools. So we go to the public schools in the Philippines, especially, and you help them out, pray with them, then pray with the family, and that's how it started. But then, and with the other communities in Catholicism, like let's say the Jesuits, there's a process where you first get permission from the bishop, and then as time goes on, the Vatican will send in people to kind of scrutinize the community, to scrutinize the Constitution. They'll send like a panel of psychologists, canon lawyers, priests, and nuns, lay people, to really see how this community is functioning.
Okay, so there is some level of scrutiny and oversight that comes from the highest tiers within Catholicism.
Oh, a lot.
That's really interesting and not something that I knew about. I think I was aware of the Vatican's need to approve exorcisms, but not the process of somebody setting up their own group, because in Christianity it's very different from that. There's many different branches and sects of Christianity that exist. So Father Bing is attempting to establish his own group under the umbrella of Catholicism, with his own caveat of potentially of helping impoverished children in schools.
That's the well, okay. So he had there's like two movements.
Okay.
So the first movement is like the face. It's like those it's the lay movement. It's called the Alliance of the Holy Family International, representing Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. So it's the idea is,
That's the whole that's the full title of the group.
Of the movement. Of
Wow,
like
that might be
of
the longest one that we've ever had on a show.
We just call it AFI, the Alliance, AHFI. And the thing is, I don't blame all the people who are in it, but the leadership. Now, the leadership is taken from. So he made another movement, and this was the consecrated. So the consecrated would be like the nuns. So we had nuns who are cloistered, and then you have monks who are cloistered. So that's not. So people think a sister is a nun, which is false. A sister is someone who is more, you see them more regularly, and they take care of, like, let's say, a school, or maybe they can be in nursing. Those are sisters where they're really more, you see them out. And a nun is cloistered. They're always in the convent, always in the monastery, and you don't see them at all, or maybe you'll see them behind a grill, we call it. So he made the lay movement, the Alliance of the Holy Family, and then you have the consecrated. Now, I wasn't a monk. I joined to become a religious brother with the intentions of, really, I wanted a pass to travel the world. It's like, golly, they're gonna pay my ticket to travel. So, and I love the faith. I'm a very, I don't know about now, but at that time I was very devoted to Catholicism, and so I felt it was a perfect match for me. And so just to go back, so he had the lay movement, the AFI, and then I know it's so confusing. Then you have the consecrated movement, which was built up of 6 institutes.
Mm-hmm.
So the name of the institute that I was in was called Oath, OATH, which was for Oblate Apostles of the Two Hearts, which is the two hearts of Jesus and Mary. And then you have 5 other communities, and so it totaled 6. So this gets very.
No, I'm with you. I'm drawing parallels almost between NXIVM, how kind of NXIVM was the overall uh, the overall group, the kind of, as you said, the kind of the face of the movement, and then there was the kind of DOS movement or the DOS program within Nexium, which was kind of a smaller, much more secretive and abusive group that existed within Nexium, similar to, I suppose, what we're hearing now about Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, with him having a much smaller, secretive group of people that were being subjected to horrific abuses that are now coming out into the public. So I'm not sure if that's exactly what was happening with your movement, but it sounds as if there was a kind of a bigger thing with a smaller thing happening inside of it.
Well, the small thing that was happening inside, the outsiders, I would say, like those who are with the AFI, they don't know anything about it. And now that I'm talking about it, it's like, hey, you need to shut the hell up, kid. And I'm not gonna shut the hell up, because they need to know. People need to know the truth. But as I was saying earlier, we had 6 institutes. The one that I was in was called the Oblate Apostles of the Two Hearts. And another one, I think they're like my main enemy. And it sucks because I work with them and I love them to death, but at the same time, they're doing some crazy bullshit. And that's the sisters. They're not nuns and they don't take vows, but they're supposed to be like secular sisters. So these secular sisters, technically, they're allowed to have a job. They work with the media, so like you'll see them with cameras and they'll be on radio stations. But they just no. I mean, I'll get into it as we do the interview. But all the cover-ups and all of the punishments, it's just even now I just feel my body like oof. So people on the outside in the AFI, they don't know about what's going on. And the Sith sisters, they're the ones who are mostly in leadership as to what will happen with the AFI. So the rest of the people, they're going on these retreats and they're thinking it's all nice, it's all good intent. But I know that the Sith, they have darker intentions.
Right. Okay. And when you're in this movement, if you're involved in one of these 6 smaller movements within the bigger movement, are you aware of each other, or is that information control pretty severe for you in one of those 6 positions as well?
Well, I joined in 2004, and I had no idea that there were 6 institutes. I only knew about 3. And then once I joined, there were actually only 5, and I found out about that. And then Father Bing had an idea, supposedly by the Holy Spirit, and he's like, "Okay, I got to make a new group." So he makes 6 groups, and um, yeah, like as I was going on in my religious journey, I started finding out new things about the group and new things about Father Bing.
Right. Okay. So you joined in 2004. You were 17 years old, but you'd been in contact with this group when you were 16 years old.
Well, actually, I was in contact with this group since I was probably since like '93.
Wow.
So probably like since I was 6, because they were allowed in Los Angeles because it seemed like a legit community, and they would go and they would just like after mass pray the rosary with people. I mean, nothing harmful, just pray, maybe read a little Bible verse, nothing extreme.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were allowed. And I think it was the year that I joined that at that time, I believe it was Cardinal Mahoney from LA, he kicked them out for some reasons. And I mean, once you're in, you don't know. And to kind of go back to your question earlier, if we knew about, if each institute knew about what was happening in the other. Well, once I was in and started climbing the ranks, what I saw was that you have the founder, Father Bing, and then he has these 6 institutes. And what he did is that he put in charge someone who was like the most obedient to him from those communities. So I was never superior, but like, so I didn't have that right to really communicate with other communities. But later on, probably like in my 8th year, 9th year, I would be attending council meetings and observe, and it's just so much to unpack because
Mm-hmm.
it's 11 years of experiences.
For people that aren't too familiar with Catholicism as a major religion, you've mentioned the bishops, you've mentioned cardinals, you've mentioned the Vatican. Can you talk us through, in the broad sense of the Catholic faith, what that hierarchy looks like, with the Pope at the top, and what position you would find bishops and cardinals and all of the players that you might discuss during our interview today?
Okay, so you have, of course, the Pope, and he doesn't deal with, I mean, there's like 1.3 billion Catholics. I mean, there's no way he's gonna deal with every cult leader. But under the Vatican, you have, it's called, I believe it's called dicasteries. These are like different groups that focus. Let's say there's they'll focus on religious life, on doing investigations as to how the religious community is functioning, and if their constitution is in accordance with canon law and with scriptures. And from there, you have cardinal. There's just so freaking much. You have maybe I'll go backwards. Instead of starting from the top, I'll start from the diocese. So the diocese is like a province, and like the governor, or yeah, the governor would be the bishop or archbishop, or in some cases, like in LA at that time, it was the cardinal. And then under the bishop, you have all of these parishes. So parishes would be like kingdom halls, and in each kingdom hall, there's like the mayor, and the mayor would be the parish priest, and the parish priest has his council. So in my community, it wasn't, we weren't working with the bishop per se, but we were working with his, he gave permission for us to be in a location. And in my case, our location was in Dover, Delaware. So when I was recruited, I was sent immediately to Delaware, where we did have permission until 2012 when we got kicked out.
So you moved from one side of America to the other, really.
Yeah.
Is this because the cardinal came and
No, well, the cardinal has nothing to do with, because each religious congregation has freedom to function. So we were recruited. I was recruited. Actually, I was recruited in Nebraska because he invited me to a retreat. I know that's why I love to travel, you know. So I was in Nebraska for a retreat, and they would call it a come and see. So a come and see is like a vocation campaign where they pretty much would brainwash you to join them. It's like, come on. It's like, come on, join us. We're happy. Come on. And then you get in there and you see their horns coming out. And so the cardinal, so religious communities, they're not run by bishops. They are run by the religious order. So they have that independence. The only thing is that they have, it's, I think the term is canonical erection, where they're allowed to erect a home, or you call it a religious house, a mission house. And when I went to Delaware, that's the first thing you see on the walls is that status of having that permission from, you would call it, I believe, the local ordinary. So the bishop is he's like the boss of that local area, but he doesn't meddle with things. He just allows, he would give permission for a community to do its work in his province.
right? So why would a cardinal show up and tell the group that they were no longer allowed to function in that way?
Well, I don't know the whole story, but they were very active in LA. And then because I believe from what I've heard is that parents of two of the brothers were complaining to the bishop or the cardinal, which is it's pretty much the same thing. They were complaining that this community is like a cult and that they brainwash their kids to join. So from what I understand, the cardinal kind of wrote a letter or something to the community addressing this. And so these two young men, they went back home, and I've spoken to them quite a lot. So they went back home, but they were so brainwashed that they made it difficult for their parents, and so the parents had to let them go, and they went back. But because of that, from what I've been told, that's kind of what kicked off the cardinal from removing his permission for this group to function there. But that
Right.
that didn't stop Father Bing from functioning there. So he still goes, but what he does is he'll go at a hotel instead of going to a parish. He'll go at a hotel where it's off limits because the church doesn't own the hotel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So they'll go to a hotel and they'll secretly tell like their biggest benefactors or followers to come meet us here, and then he'll give their talks. But what they would do is like you go to like let's say a hotel, you go somewhere private, and it gives that feeling of like elitism, like hey, like we're the only ones here, and the rest. The way they would like, especially Father Bing, the way he would like come across is like the rest of the church. Oh my God, the demons and the Freemasons, how they're attacking us, and we gotta. And they would have like their holy water bottles, and I don't care if you use your holy water, but they would use it like in a superstitious way,
Right.
and they would look at everyone as the enemy. And but once you're inside, it's like exciting. And when I'm talking about the missions, that's more the AFI movement.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so it's not yet going inside to the inner circle, like the heart, which was the six institutes.
So you joined at 17. Just talk us through that whole journey then.
Okay, so my brother, I love him to death. One of them, he was recruited in 1999, I believe, right before the Y2K. He was recruited and he was a brother for a set number of years. So that's kind of why I would be in touch with this community because I had my brother in there. And as I believe I mentioned before, not everything was so extreme at first from an outsider. And even speaking to my brother, who he of course he's also left, he was telling me that during his time it wasn't so extreme and uh it wasn't so like spontaneous because in his time it was just he was a missionary, and then they wanted to either send him to Rome or to Australia to start studying either philosophy or theology. So there was a bit of a structure where they wanted to work with the church and they wanted to give a proper education to the members. But my parents were just kind of like unsure because my brother had been there for 7 years and nothing was happening. And then once I was invited to Nebraska, I went really to see my brother and to hook up with chicks I mean, hey, I mean, I was young. I wanted to experience life.
Yeah, yeah.
And I mean, that didn't happen. Once I got there, I remember the priest, his name is Father John Santos. I remember him looking at me and telling me, you're gonna be a brother, so you're gonna join us. So I was kind of like almost coerced, or maybe it is coercion. I don't know. Is that coercion?
Mm-hmm.
So I was kind of coerced into joining, and so I had complete faith in this priest. He was a very people would say that he can read your heart, that he can smell your sins, and that he can tell you what you're doing wrong. And so there was this fear, like, oh my gosh, here's this holy guy telling me that I need to join. So shoot, all right, I guess I'm not gonna meet up any chicks or anything. So I guess I'm say goodbye to my family, and that was it. And once I was in, I wasn't really allowed to see my brother because I was sent to Delaware and he stayed in Nebraska. But from what I understand, it seemed like they were using him for his skills because he's a good speaker. He's good with the Spanish community, and for me, I was still young, and so I wasn't really allowed to see my brother. But when I did see him, like the very limited times I did see him, I could see that he was going through some kind of a conflict. And I remember Father John telling me that my brother was leaving and that now I have to like carry the cross for my family, because what Father Bing preaches is that if you leave the community, if you leave the brotherhood, you're going to be hexed, which is like, cursed. You're going to be a misfit for the rest of your life, and that your family from generation to generation is going to receive this curses because you said no to God. So in my mind, it's like, holy crap, I have to do more intensity to, I guess, support my family to protect them from the evil spirits and stuff like that.
You mentioned Father John there previously. Is this the bishop that worked with your family and the bishop that you would have been familiar with before you fell in with Father Bing?
No, so Father Bing, he founded this congregation, and you start off as a brother. So like for me, it's like, let's say Brother Ryan, and then once you climb up, um, if you do your education, supposed to be like in Rome or in DC, where you do your philosophy, and then you do your theology, then you can be ordained a priest. So Father John was a priest under Father Bing. So the main guy in the story is really Father Bing. So the bishops are like outsiders who have a
Right.
very limited role, but they have the power to either permit the ministry or the movement from being there, or he can give them the boot.
And so the really, as you said, coercive messages and the really powerful imagery around how you and your family will suffer, it starts off quite early on with your interactions with Father John, and this is kind of low tier leadership, and this is so you're already being given these messages before you move up the rungs of the movement.
Well, in religious groups, like let's say you want to join an order, there is what's called the postulancy, where you go and you just try it out. Let's say for 6 months to a year, and there's this thing called discernment, where if you feel that maybe you're called to live this life, then they'll give you what's called the novitiate. The novitiate, you become a novice, and you're trained in the prayer life, you're trained in the specific charism of the community for 1 year, and then from there you take your vows. Now in Catholicism, it's not like you take your vows and that's it. There are steps. So after your novitiate and you want to continue in this life, it's called your first temporary vows. So let's say I want to take my vows of chastity, poverty, and obedience with this community. Temporary vows is you will do it for, let's say, 3 to 4 years. At the end of those 3 to 4 years, there's supposed to be an evaluation if this is really meant for you. So it's like it's a journey and a relationship, but it's supposed to be freely given. And at the end of those 4 years, you can either go home or stay. And in my case, it's like, well, if I go home, I'm gonna be damned for all eternity and experience all the flames of hell and all that. So I guess I'm gonna stay, And so I stayed another few years. And in the church, what the church does is at the end of your second temporary profession, you are given the choice to take perpetual vows and live this for the rest of your life, or you can happily just pack your bags and move on to a next stage of life. But it wasn't like that with his community.
Wow, this is really my first kind of real insight into the way that the Catholic Church works in terms of accreditation and all that stuff. It's really quite fascinating, actually. I'm just trying to kind of go through it all in my mind. It's really confusing. I mean, did you know about all of these things before you became more seriously involved?
Well, all I thought was, hey, I'm joining a religious group. We're going to be missionaries, and hell, I mean, I even before I joined in LA, not with the community, but in the parishes within in downtown LA, I with other young adults, teenagers, college students, I would go to downtown LA with I think it was a Society of St. Paul, and we would like pack food for the homeless. We gather clothes, and I've always had that um, relationship with doing things in the church. So I've always had that involvement, but I didn't know that once I joined this group, that there were going to be other institutes. I just thought that I was going to join, get an education, be a missionary, maybe do some of the same things I did in downtown LA, like helping the poor or feeding the homeless. I didn't know. It's just kind of like as I was saying earlier, it's like, come on, hey, like we're good people, come on, follow us.
So you are acquainted with the group in Los Angeles. You travel to Nebraska to the retreat where you are like, okay, I want to travel. This sounds interesting. Religion, the Catholic faith already speaks to me. I'm familiar with it. I've grown up with it. It's something that resonates with me. So a life helping other people sounds great. And I get to travel at the same time. So then you go to the East Coast and you go to Delaware and at the end of your 4 years, it's either stay and carry on with your journey, even though it's starting to look like it might not be exactly what you were promised, or leave and all of your family generations to come will be cursed and doomed and hexed and it will be all your fault. Would you say that that's kind of like a fair summary of where we're up to in your
Uh,
story so far?
that's fair. The first year was in Delaware. That's called the postulancy. When you're a postulant, and then I know some did leave, and I'm happy that they left. But for me, because my brother left during my postulancy, and I was already getting this burden on me that if I don't make it, then like you said, doom
Oh,
and
of
gloom.
course, because if he was still there, he could have made sure that your family didn't get the curse, but once he's left, it's all on you then.
All on me.
Wow.
But the thing that changed, and I was mentioning how my brother was saying that our formations were totally different. So he entered, and it's just missionary life, and meeting people, meeting bishops, and even being on TV. It seemed so normal. And when I joined, I did that 1 year of postulancy, and right away at the end of postulancy, Father Bing announces, okay, you're going to be going to the Philippines. So they gave us like 2 months of preparation because we were going to be culture shocked. So I'm thinking I'm going to the Philippines for like maybe a year, but actually I stayed there for maybe 4 or 5 years. So I went to the Philippines, and we have we had a house. Um, the diocese was in San Jose, and the bishop, the God, this is like just so much storytelling. The first bishop who was there, he gave us permission. But then from what I understand is that the Vatican moved this bishop who gave us permission. The Vatican moved him from San Jose, Philippines to Laguna, Philippines. So once this bishop was removed, a new bishop came to fill up the void. And now this new bishop had no idea really about our community. So I go there for my novitiate, and I mean it was like it was like a movie, because once, I mean, I thought that our community is legit, but then it's like they were telling us that this new bishop is out to persecute us, that they're spying on us. And so we spy on it, gave like the green light to spy on each other to see if maybe someone is like perhaps an insider for the new bishop, or if maybe the people outside are spying on us. So there was just a rise. For me, that was the beginning of a rise of paranoia in my story. And this new bishop, from what I see now, he wasn't someone to mess with. He wants to be clear, like what is going on, how are you functioning, how are the members, and he has every right to know how everything is going.
Well, that's why
But
those positions exist in the first place, isn't it? To make sure that there isn't abuses taking place and people exploiting their positions of power. That's what you would hope oversight would accomplish.
exactly. However, they would reform our mind into thinking that this new bishop was actually an enemy trying to destroy our community. And so what happened, so after my 1 year of novitiate, I took my vows, and I send you a picture. I send you a bunch of pictures, but in one of them we're all wearing black, and I think I'm in the bottom and I'm kneeling, and it was like the happiest day of my life, because it's like you finally made it, it's like I've at least reached this checkpoint. So my family is saved for now, it's like thank God I reached it. I didn't get kicked out or anything. So I'm doing good. But during that time, we're looking at the rest of the church as the enemy, not only the bishop, but even other parish priests. Like they would tell us, oh, they're starting to spy on us. They're making reports about us. They don't like our way of life, and the way of life in the inside. I'll get to that, but it was very extreme. So out of the blue, it was like maybe 10 or 11 p.m. I remember they woke us all up, and it's like, hurry up, pack your bags, we're all leaving. And so like at 11 p.m. we get in the bus like in the middle of the night, and we travel from Nueva Ecija, San Jose, to Laguna, where the other bishop, who was a bit more supportive, is located. But in our mind, we're thinking, oh my God, they're out to get us. It was a psychological warfare.
Wow. Oh my goodness. And this is before the end of your kind of first 4 years.
Yeah, yeah, it's probably before that. Yeah, so that's probably like maybe during my second year, like during that second year is like when in the middle of the night we get sent um
Wow.
to Laguna. And once we're there, our house, it was it's 4 floors. So the first floor is like the lobby. The second floor is the dormitory. So it's like one huge, there's like 50 of us. So it's like one huge room with just bunk beds. And these beds aren't mattress. Our beds are hardwood. So we sleep on hardwood. And then the the third floor would be the chapel, which is like probably the nicest part of the building. And then and then the fourth floor is the cage. It's like a cage. It's a cage. It's a freaking cage, we
We
have
called
there.
it the cage because, well,
It was a cage. I mean, I wish I had pictures. I mean, I didn't have no phone or camera back then. You have no belongings. All you have are the clothes that you are provided with, and it was only like 5 t-shirts, five underwear, 5 socks, three pair of pants, three clericals, and that's about it. And one belt and a pair of shoes and flip flops, and that's it.
Oh my goodness.
So in the cage, we do our laundry, we do our cooking, we even have basketball. If if you can have space, we do our little basketball, and that was. But we like we would look out and see the people
Hmm.
living their lives because I had never been to the Philippines. It's my first time, and I'm very curious. And then later, Father Bing says that to look outside, you're gonna be hexed because someone might give you the evil eye. So I was like, oh damn, I can't. I mean, I hadn't seen a woman for like over a year, and I was dying. It's like,
That's quite interesting what you said there about the Philippines, because it sounds quite similar to some of the communes that existed within the Children of God, who operated quite heavily within the Philippines at one stage and had big buildings with lots of people crammed inside with kind of 2 or 3 4-tiered bunk beds.
oh, I didn't know about that.
And of course, encouraging your eye not to wander outside of the group is one way of making sure that your allegiances don't waver in any way. You can't be tempted into secular activities and environments and conversations and relationships if you don't have access to those things, even just visually, let alone physically.
We had no access to internet, to radio. If we would watch like a movie, it would be approved by either Father Bing or by a superior of the community where we were living in. And I remember one of the brothers, he was, because if it's movie night, it's a big thing. Like we like prepare like food. Sometimes like if it was in Delaware, we prepare like nachos or like chips. We call it French fries. Um, and in the Philippines, they prepare like carbonara, like all this like nice pasta, and it was like something big. It's like, oh, thank God, we're gonna have something to like look forward to, like a little break. And I remember one of the superiors, he said, "All right, community, we have a special movie. We're going to watch Seven." And I know. It's like, I mean, all of the Americans were like, oh my God, you're going to watch a real freaking movie, not a saint movie. I mean, nothing wrong with saint movies,
But it,
so we were all like hyped up, like, especially the foreigners. So the foreigners are like those from America, Australia. We were all like, oh, hell yeah. Like, let's get this projector rolling. All right, let's go, guys. Let's get the food. Come on, hurry up. Let's go. Chop, chop. And then he puts the DVD in, and it's the Seven Deadly Sins by Father Bing. And we're like, oh, come on, man. So it was like a huge letdown, but I mean, we were excited.
so it's a recording of Bing talking about the 7 deadly sins.
So he has like a bunch of recordings. He has a bunch of stuff on YouTube,
Right.
but this is before YouTube. And because like I was saying, how the Sith, they deal with the media, so they do record him.
I was
And
wondering about that. Yeah, the propaganda side of things. If they have the skill set to work with media, are they propagandizing?
well, to us, I mean, you're watching, or either you're watching, or they'll play the disc of his talks all the time, and or you hear him like praying the rosary on like the recording. So it's always like centered on Father Bing and his teachings.
Let me just make sure that I'm following everything correctly. So 17 to 21 is LA, Nebraska, Delaware, with the Philippines in the middle of that.
Yes.
And during your time in the Philippines, you're living with only men. So would you address each other as brothers?
Yes, like it would be brother. And once I took my vows, they changed my name. So I was no longer Brother
Oh,
Ryan. My new name was Brother Joseph Maria. So you had to call me Brother Joseph, or they would call me Brother Giuseppe, Brother Jose,
Is that
whatever.
typical of people that follow the Catholic faith?
I think some communities do, not all, but I think some communities kind of take that from when Christ, like for example, changed the name of, I don't know. I haven't read my Bible in so long, but he changed a few names. Like, oh, like Simon, he called him Peter. So it's like the idea that they pushed too much was in my community was the dying to yourself to become this new man, to become this new person. And they would also push this idea that as religious, you have no rights, you only have duties. So it's not militaristic like the Moonies, like that new community who have like the guns and all that. But in a sense, they had that, that strictness and firmness where you have no say because your identity is now kind of, it's been dissipated to becoming one with the society.
The decision for Father Bing to send your group over to the Philippines and give you those 2 months to plan and prepare for a change in culture, temperature, and everything that you can expect from, moving from one part of the world to another. Was there a reason that the Philippines was chosen?
Yes. So the Philippines is where he's actually from. He's Filipino, and the main bishop who was supporting him at that time was located, as I said initially, in San Jose until he got moved by the Vatican to go to Laguna. So it made sense because from what I see it from a recruitment perspective, it's like you get these Americans or Australians or Irish or whatever, or even we had one girl from England. You get them, you like you have them stay 1 year in Delaware, and then from there, you send them to the Philippines where you disappear. And
Mm-hmm.
what happens is your family gets to send in money and provide. They think they're helping you out. Like my parents thought that I was getting, taken care of, but that money doesn't go to you. It goes to either the community that you're in, or it goes to support Father Bing and his missions of traveling the world. Now this guy travels all over the world, and so it made sense. Another thing that made sense was that I think that what Father Bing wanted to do was to make it appear that this group was doing amazing things. So in the Philippines, not to put down my Filipino brothers and sisters, but I feel that many of them were easy targets because here's a life in the Philippines. Many unfortunately go through extreme poverty, where they have to really work extremely hard to provide, and money doesn't always come easy. Now here you're in a community where you do get your meals, although the meals are like, I freaking felt like I was in the Oliver Twist, a Charles Dickens.
Please, sir, can I have more?
Yeah, can I have some more? And it's like, no. But it made sense because I think that Father Bing wanted to show the church, like the larger church, like, see, look, we got all these recruits, we're doing good. But there was just so much deception going on in the background.
I'm guessing that Father Bing has taken his 3 pledges and or oaths as well, including, the oath of for poverty.
Well, he started off as a Salesian back when he was, I don't know, 20 years old. I'm not sure. But from his life as a Salesian, which is another community, which I mentioned earlier, originated from Italy, um, he had this inspiration to make a new group. So he made a group before the group that I was in. And I didn't know that until lately when I'm doing more of my history searching, my own research. And from what I understand, because Father Bing would kind of mention it, and he would say that the church took it away. It kind of reminds me of oh my God, Lord of the Rings. Like Gollum was like, my precious, you took my precious, and he had like this bitterness, like, and I didn't know the whole story, but his version is that he made this community after he left the Salesians, and that the church took it from him, and now what he does is he has like this fear that he would tell us about, that the church, the bishops and the priests are going to want to take all of his property. So what he does is, like in Delaware, just to make the story a little shorter, we did get kicked out eventually. And what Father Bing did before we got kicked out was he was telling us the same thing is going to happen that happened before. They're trying to persecute us because they want our property. Well, they are not going to have it. So he, with his like most loyal benefactors, they founded this foundation where it's all these like loopholes, but the intention is, so you have this foundation where the name of the property is under them, but in actuality, even though we've been kicked out, and I sent you a few pictures, there are still brothers and sisters operating there in secret. So it's just like, it's a mess.
So Father Bing, of course, he knew that you were going to get kicked out of Delaware because he was doing the same things that got him kicked out of everywhere else in terms of, not abiding by the correct laws or procedures that were in place.
Well, things were a little different in Delaware because, like in LA, I wasn't involved in that. I was recruited from there, but I wasn't involved in what was happening. In Delaware, I was there for 3 years, and like the first year, I'm in charge of like formation. So like the new brothers who come, I would like pray with them. I would like lead them in the next schedule. And like my second year, I was in freaking solitary confinement. And then after that 1 year, I started kind of getting into some of the missions within the diocese in Delaware, and I was noticing some like red flags that were happening.
Okay. Well, solitary confinement is a big red flag in itself.
Well, I thought in my mind, because they planted it, they planted this kind of like freaking Inception. They made me feel and believe that I wanted it, which in fact I didn't. Father Jose, he made an announcement to the community one day saying that I requested to be in the chapel in isolation, as like an act of service to God, kind of thing. And I remember all the brothers were like, wow, like, okay. And I was just like, I was speechless
Was this the
because,
first you'd heard of it? Like,
yeah,
wow, that's news to me.
I mean, I don't mind praying. I think that if someone wants to pray, go ahead, knock yourself out. But like, I mean, to be there in the prayer chapel, and my schedule would be from like 12:45 a.m. is rising. You have time to like drink your coffee, wash up, and by 1:30 you have to be in the chapel for the beginning of prayers.
Oh my goodness.
And the community, they would be in there from like, let's say 1:30 to 6 or 7, and then sometimes they would join me, other times they pray in another chapel and I'm just there by myself, just existing. And so let's say they did join me for prayers. They will leave at 7 o'clock, and I'm still supposed to stay there, and I'm in there until 9 or 10 p.m., depending on when someone else comes to relieve me from being in prayer. So yeah, I mean, they would say, "Oh, you're not in solitary confinement because we're walking by or we're there," but it pretty much was for me a huge period of darkness and isolation, and you can't say anything because it's like I did say something once. I said, "Hey, I'm kind of tired of being stuck in this chapel praying," and I remember members were like, "How can you complain? You're praying. Like, how can you like revolt against us? That's the evil spirit." And it's like, well, damn, all right. I
Wow.
I guess I should just shut my mouth then.
So you were almost, well, you were coerced into agreeing to do this stint of solitary praying, basically on silence restriction.
Yes.
That's horrendous. It feels like a punishment that they would give to somebody whose faith is faltering. Do you feel like there was any particular reason that you were encouraged to take part in this practice?
Well, I remember Father Bing. We had like a council meeting, and he was like evaluating the superiors. And Father Jose, we're waiting for him. He never came to the meeting because he's doing his own damn thing. And so I don't know, like maybe because I'm from LA, and I don't know, like my brother, he's a boxer, and I'm used to that a bit of aggression. Um, I'm not physically aggressive, but at the same time, I don't like being a little pushover. So we're waiting, and Father Bing's like, all right, we're just going to continue without him. So can anyone say something about Father Jose? And everyone is like, oh, he's such a good guy. He's great. And I open my mouth. Well, he's doing nothing. He ain't doing nothing. All he's doing is staying in his room, not doing much. And so the next day, Father Jose was pissed off, and he was like, "How come someone is talking bad about me?" And then like a week later, it's the announcement after a morning prayer was, "Okay, community, I just have a special announcement. Brother Joseph, he so courageous. He came up to me saying, 'Father, I want to offer my life as a victim to save the community, to save the mission. So I'm requesting to stay permanently in the chapel.'" And brother Joseph, brother Giuseppe, he's looking at me as he's saying this, and he's like pointing at me. He's like, "I will grant you permission to do this as you wanted." So that's your obedience. So for us, because we do take the vows of chastity, poverty, and obedience. At least for me, I took obedience hardcore, and many of us did. And I haven't gotten into the abuses regarding obedience, but for me, it's like that Manchurian candidate, when they say your name and you're hypnotized. So for me, it was like the hypnotic word obedience. Like, oh, you can't say anything. I got to do this.
And you hadn't mentioned anything about staying in the chapel full time up to that point.
Hell no, I was pissed off. I mean, it's
Oh
like
my goodness.
I'm thinking, yo, I joined this community to be a missionary, to do more like social work, and I don't mind praying, but like I felt it was more of a punishment. And
It
then
feels
later,
it feels that way when you said that. And after explaining what happened with this person, it makes a lot of sense. I also wondered if it could be possible that you were going to be asked to move into a leadership role. And to do that, it would be kind of taking away the last few dregs of your critical thinking, or to really break down your will, last those last few dregs of your will before saying, would you like to step into this role where you are going to be in the inner circle of people who are the most faithful and devout, not to God or not to the Holy Spirit, but to Bing.
yeah, I really felt that they were. For a while, I thought that this is just a test. Soon they're going to rescue me, and everything will be fine. And then, they would pull me out on occasions to like do missionary work. And on one occasion, I did go back to Nebraska just for 2 days to help the Spanish community. And when I was there, I received news that my grandmother had just passed away.
Mhm.
And so at that time, I was going through my darkness because I was going like in and out of isolation. And not only that, but like going back to punishments, I would see other brothers and sisters get allowed to go to California for a day or two. And I had been in the community for 7 years, and I was never allowed to go to go and see my family. So I spoke to Father Jose and I told him, hey, look, I would like to go home to see my family, to pray and to mourn for the
Mhm.
loss. And he got pissed off, and I got pissed off back. And I told him, hey, look, buddy, I've been doing this stupid obedience of being locked up in the chapel for I didn't do anything wrong. I don't know what your problem is, but hey, I've been obedient to the damn letter. And all I'm asking is permission to be with my family, to pray with them. So what he did was, okay, I see you really want to be with your family. So I'm going to talk to them and see how we can arrange an agreement on how you're going to go back to LA. I said, fine, perfect. So the next day he calls me. He's like, hey, I spoke to your family, and they're saying, you know what? It's better if Brother Joseph stay there. We would prefer to him to pray for our family, to pray for us in this dark time. And I'm thinking, well, if they're the ones who are saying that, then okay. I mean, what? I don't have money. I have no paycheck. I can't buy my own ticket. So it's like, all right.
Did that conversation ever take place?
Between my family and Father Jose, yes, but not the way he was narrating the story. Because my grandma died on my birthday, which is July 15.
Mm.
And then my brother, who used to be a member, he came to visit, thinking that the community is all fine and it's all nice and dandy. So he came to visit, and it was for Christmas time. And he asked my superior, which was not Father Jose, it was actually another priest who is actually good. He asked Father Philip, hey, can Brother Joseph join us for breakfast at IHOP? And Father Philip, go ahead. I mean, he'd love to have a nice warm meal for once, for sure. So I joined my brother for coffee and pancakes, and he asked me, he's like, bro, why didn't you come to the funeral? Like,
Oh
what's
gosh.
up? What's up with that? And I'm looking at him. I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean? Why I didn't go to the funeral? You and mom and the rest of the family didn't want me to go. And he's looking at me and he's like, no. He's like, we wanted you to go. And I told him, well, Father Jose said that you and mom and the family were pushing that I stay here and pray for y'all. He goes, no. What happened was that Father Jose called us and said, hey, I hope you understand that Brother Joseph, he's so busy on mission. We need him critically to take care of some things, and I hope you understand. Is that okay with y'all? And my brother was like, well, I mean, I don't know what to say. So we just said, all right. I mean, if that's going to be so difficult.
When
So
in
my
reality you were in the chapel on solitary confinement.
yeah.
Oh my
So my
goodness,
brother
this
asked me,
guy, he sounds absolutely horrific.
well, people don't see it like that. They see him as a holy man, and I'm tired of I'm tired of the narrative that ex members, not only in my group, but even ex JWs, ex Scientologists. I don't give a damn what group, what church, but I'm tired of this narrative that if you leave the group, that you're bad. And so, I mean, the narrative was that I have to be quiet. I have to offer up my sufferings to God and just pretend it never happened. And if I speak up, it's because I'm bad. And in my opinion, that's bullshit. I think that it's time that people know the truth and, start using critical thinking. But in that case, I was only sleeping from, like, as I said, 10 to 12:45 a.m. That's like not even 3 hours. I mean, critical thinking, it's like nearly impossible. Can't even function.
The same four walls as well, with no interaction really with anybody. I mean,
Oh, no,
it's enough to bring on delirium, I imagine. Not to mention you are grieving at this point because you've lost a family member and you don't think that there's scope for you to go home and take part in the mourning rituals and the different ways in people celebrate someone's life. And I know that there are different ways that people honor different people over here typically, which shocked my friend over in America in New Jersey. She actually phoned me to confirm this. People over here typically hold wakes where there's a lot of alcohol and people get quite drunk. And she was like, "Is that true? Because over here, everybody just wears black and eats food inside somebody's house." And I was like, "Yeah, typically, like people, because a lot of the time that's what the individual who's passed on would have wanted." So, of course, you're not thinking about alcohol or partying or celebrating someone's life in that way, but just to be with your family, to offer support, to have support because a significant person in your life has passed away. And then to have that whole situation manipulated by one person who has this grudge against you, it seems, because of something negative you said about him. I mean, what kind of person has to exercise their power over another individual just because they've had a little bit of negativity said about them? Doesn't that really kind of paint the picture of the kind of person that he must have been to do that to you and your family and think that he is holy in himself?
It took me years to kind of break that down. Even when I was there, I remember I had a break from my prayer time, and I just remember being like, because we lived like on a big ass farm, like acres and acres, and we had our goats and chickens, and I just remember going outside. And in Delaware, it's not like a huge city like New York or London. It's it's um it's a little it's the country. I can't do that country accent. It's the country. So I'm in the country and I'm just like, it's pitch black outside. I'm looking at the stars, and I'll never forget it because I'm thinking like, God, I mean, if you're really there, you can make the stars shine, and they're like thousands of or millions of miles away. I don't know how many miles away, but it's like, why is there so much darkness in my life? And why is it that I've obeyed everything? I've done everything to the letter, and my life feels like a curse. And so it was it was difficult, but at that period, I was kind of wrapping up my term for the temporary profession. So this is like around 2011, 2012. I don't remember all the years, but I remember we were getting kicked out of Delaware, and I was going to be sent back to the Philippines. And before I was to get sent back, I spoke with one of the superiors and I told him my situation. It's like, look, I gave it my best, but in a couple months, I'll be finishing up my temporary vows. I just want to make it clear that I'm ready to leave the society and go
Wow.
back and live like a normal person, and maybe support from outside. But for now, I can't do this. And the response that I got was, "Well, how come? Like, why you want to leave?" Well, like, and it was very like passive aggressive. I'm like, well, I mean, I didn't sign up for this shit. I mean, I didn't sign up to be stuck in the freaking chapel all day. I signed up to join this community because I thought that I would be a missionary. And what I've received instead is the complete opposite. And like the answer I got was pretty much like, well, your vows aren't finished yet. Like you're still under obedience. So sorry. So like a few days later, it's like, here's your ticket. You know, I go to the Philippines, and there it's like you disappear because it's like there's no one to take care of you. And I did try reaching out to superiors there, and I remember in the homily, it was either a homily or after a homily is um like the sermon. So it was either in the sermon during mass or after mass. The priest was like, because I did write letters saying, "Hey, Father, I'm going through so much struggle. I need direction. I need guidance." And I tried talking to him face to face, and my God, this feels like a therapy session. Anyway, so I would talk to him face to face, and he would like just blow me off. So I wrote this letter saying I'm in urgent need of pretty much for my mental health. I need some guidance. And so during the sermon, he's like, there are some gay, super gay guys here because they're right. Some brother here wrote a letter like a sissy, and this is all in the Filipino language. It's like mixed with English, so I understand everything. Like there's a sissy here who can't be a man, can't pick up his cross, can't follow God, and he's reaching out to me like some kind of girl. Like that's so gay, and I'm there like
How disgusting is that? That's vile language to use. And it's just incorrect in so many ways, isn't it?
but as this is happening, my position is I have to offer this to God, and I'm battling because I knew like two. So this is like 2 years has passed since I left, since we got kicked out of Delaware, maybe a year or two, and it's like I'm trying to. A part of me wants to leave, and the other part of me wants to be that faithful servant. And after that, it's like the punishments increased. My mental health was just spiraling. I didn't know what to do. So it was, I haven't really gotten too much into the punishments, but I must say that my heart was just spiraling out of control.
Do you feel like in that time where you are so desperate for some guidance, some help with your religious and spiritual crisis as well as your mental health, that when you have somebody in leadership standing up to give the type of message that you need to fix your problems by picking up your cross and praying, and increasing your devotion, do you take those messages sort of as that person is telling you to? Do you then take that responsibility and say, well, if I'm having this crisis of faith, it must be because of what I'm doing wrong?
I would really put like that burden of guilt where I have to carry these crosses. But like the thing that really like I think mess with my mind the most was that because we would be transferred a lot, and some superiors were very culty, while others were like it's like a normal religious community. So it's like I didn't understand what was going on, and eventually, kind of like skipping a whole bunch, but like eventually, like the Vatican, like started intervening, and once the Vatican got involved, kind of like earlier in the story where Father Bing he set up his first community, the church got involved, and he complained that he took my community. So the Vatican got involved and removed him from leadership. They removed Father Bing from leadership. Boom. And all the superiors who were put in place in the six institutes, they were all removed as well.
Right.
So
So the first time they didn't take his title away from him, but this time they did. So Father Bing currently is not recognized as somebody in leadership within the Catholic Church.
Well, the first time, from what I understood, they just took it away from him, and
The
and then
group.
the group, and then he made this new community, and then again, it's not taking away. It's pretty much like the idea is, um, the founder inevitably is going to die one day, and so kind of to distinguish if if the community is being authentic, they remove the founder and see how the community can function on its own. So what happened was they removed Father Bing and the superiors that he put in charge. However, from inside sources, and even from me, being there, I knew, because people would say, "Oh, you got inside sources. That's not legit." Man, I was there. It's like he was still trying to call shots, um, like undercover, I guess you could say,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
still like under wraps. And what happened is, I mean, I feel that there's this narcissism where he just always wants to be the main guy. And once the Vatican is like, no, you can't always be the main guy. You have to allow the process to happen for a community to be officially recognized by the church. So he split from the old group, and now he's under a new development, new phase, and I don't know what their name might be, but I believe that they're still using AFI as part of their face.
Right. Okay. So at what point do you move from being part of the general group, the AFI group, to the one of the six smaller groups working within the AFI movement?
Okay, so AFI would be like, they work with the lay people, like people who aren't consecrated. So like in youth groups, so they had like youth groups, and from the youth group, like I guess the best of the best, I don't know, or like I guess those whom they have a vision. Oh, like Father John, he looked at me. It's like, oh, I think I see God is calling you. So from there, they choose. And so I wasn't anymore part of AFI. I was part of the inside circle of the religious life.
And the punishments that you mentioned in some of your writing to me, I'm guessing that those were not public knowledge to the brothers and sisters in the AFI movement.
Those in the AFI movement, they don't know shit. They
Mm.
don't know. They don't know what's going on. They're just there to hear Father Bing's talks, to pray with him, and that's about it. I mean, they don't know what's going on. So when I say what really is happening, I'll get comments on like my Facebook, especially on Facebook, where it's like, "Oh my God, you're working for the devil. You're a deceiver," or it's like, if you were beaten, then you should take it as God's love. I mean, this stuff is that's it's sick. It's a sick mentality, but they use that, one, because they don't know what the hell they're talking about, and they think that I'm actually attacking someone who's good and holy. But as I'm breaking down my story, I hope you understand that there is nothing good or holy about what Father Bing and what his sidekicks, the way that they operate.
So in these six subgroups, how many people existed roughly? Can you summarize in each in your group, for example, how many of you were there?
God, that's hard because, like I was saying, it gets more intense as you as it goes on. It's like a freaking Netflix series, and like I remember, one of the superiors, he was like just so frustrated because of course, we join not to be a cult. You join to really do something good in your life. And he was like, he looked down because he was telling the community that Father Bing had given obedience to them, that they have to recruit like 50 to 70 members like every 3 months. And like if you don't hit the quota of recruitments, Father Bing will chew you out and kind of like humiliate you in public, saying that you're not praying, that if you were truly praying, you would see the gifts of the Holy Spirit, and there would be an abundance of members. So what I saw was that sometimes they would just recruit anybody. And there was one case where the superior was telling the community, I feel bad because I recruited all these members that Father Bing wanted me to recruit, and this is in the Philippines. And one of them, like a week later, he tells me, "Hey, brother, when can I go home?" And I told this guy, "You can't go home. This is where God wants you." And this guy,
Is this in oath as well?
yes, at the time, pre Vatican, I guess, intervention. And
Right.
so he tells this guy, you can't go home. And the response of the guy was, well, I have my wife and kids at home, and I think, they probably need me. And so this superior was just so frustrated because he's trying to hit the quotas, but it's like, they're impossible quotas that Father Bing would put up. And if you don't hit it, he's going to really humiliate you and talk how evil you are. And I would see the stress of so many members.
Are these quotas, are they recruitment numbers or financial numbers?
Well, there were recruitment, and then once I was, towards like the final stages, okay, so we have checklists, and I think every freaking cult might have their own checklist, but our checklist was like, you have to do 10 rosaries a day, you have to recruit a bunch of members, you have to raise the dead, you have to it's like stuff that probably not. I'm not going to raise anybody from the dead. And then it's like, oh, ye of little faith. It's like, damn, and then you have to procure money, and you have to procure a lot of money. And it's like, if you don't, then Father Bing or the Sith sisters are like, look how small your faith is. If you had real faith, you'd be able to do X, Y, and Z.
So when you don't reach these numbers or meet these expectations when you're in oath, is this when you would be subjected to some of the punishments that you talked about in your emails to me? Or when would that severity come in for you? Because it's not something, as you mentioned, is common knowledge to AFI, to the wider kind of facing public group, but it is stuff that's happening to you and other people around you in the more kind of insular environment under Father Bing.
So like Father Bing's last hurrah when he was still in charge of the oath was it was called the second novitiate. So earlier we had a novitiate that 1 year. And then his idea was all the brothers who have been on mission or who have been away from a formation house, they've been cursed and hexed. So they need to come back to be under, again, like a strict as hell formation. And so I didn't really get to see the punishments for not filling out those quotas. But I can only imagine how it is now, because I know he's still functioning. He just has a separate group. But in regards to those quotas, like recruitment, and I think it was mostly like just humiliation and public shaming within the community.
So you mentioned in your emails to me something about the basement, and I think you'd nicknamed it the dungeon.
Yes. Before I get into that, just to provide a little bit of more context, because I have mentioned, the vows of chastity, poverty, and obedience. In obedience, we had like 3 degrees. The first degree is you submit your judgment. The second degree is you submit your reason. And then the third degree is you submit your will. And then the group had what was called like a code word, which was the 4th degree. And I didn't practice this. However, I was always ready to do it in case I was given this fourth degree. So what fourth degree was, they give you the most humiliating thing. And the idea is, if Christ suffered so much, if, the saints of old suffered so much, so therefore we should be able to be radical and extreme. So I knew about this already, like my first year in, from other members who had done it. And fourth degree was, you had to eat your own or someone else's feces.
Oh
And
my goodness.
and many of them would do it. And I only knew maybe, afterwards, about how often it was. So like some members had to do it every day during Lent. Or another example is, like for the sisters, it's like, oh, you know what, you're not good enough to do the fourth degree. You're not humble enough. So what we're going to do is, we're going to help you to be humble. So they get the feces and rub it over the face of one of the sisters. And that's like your humiliation. That is your fourth degree. So for us, obedience, although I didn't do that, I was ready. My mind was ready to do whatever the hell I needed to do to get a job done. If that meant no sleep, I wouldn't sleep. If my obedience was to shun my family, which I did, then I would shun my family. Whatever it was, the idea is, you have no rights, you only have duties. So we have this extreme idea of obedience. And then Father Bing, as time develops, you have this. I think he really loved Alex Jones and all that. Like, oh my gosh, like even like saying his name, I just want to grab a barf bag and just start throwing up. But like, he would show us some of his clips, and we would have this idea of nuclear war, happening anytime. And so what Father Bing did in the communities is, we would, in our basement, we would set it up for in case the nuclear war happens. And we set it up so it didn't look like a freaking basement. It's like, it has like a whole bunch of canned foods and a little shower, and you have like a dark room with like one lamp, so you can do your prayers there. So after I did my 1 year of isolation, um, I was let free. I was allowed to get out, and they had me go to Puerto Rico. Everything was going fine in Puerto Rico. I was doing a mission, and everything was going great. I was so excited. I was able to practice what I always wanted to practice. And one of the sisters was being a pain in the ass, and she expected me to be some kind of pushover like the rest of them. And I got in her face, and I told her, I pretty much told her, well, shut the hell up. And because of that, uh, because you're not supposed to react, like we had what it's called an examination of conscience, where you examine and reflect your sins. One of the things there that they put was, as a sin, was having reactions, talking back, or like having negative facial reactions. So we were trained to be like stone cold, and only the smile. And if not, oh, I'm sinning. So you always have to have this goody two shoes look. And I got pissed off. I'm like, I'm not gonna take this crap from this person. So I stood up to her, and then I got in big trouble, and I got humiliated by Mother Agnes. She's the head of the Sith, and she is a terrible person. Um, and then I spoke to Father Bing, and he told me, all right, so what's going to happen now is, we're going to have you 3 months in isolation. So this time, the war might come, so we need to be ready. So we're going to have you kind of as like the lab mouse, and you're going to stay in the basement, which we nicknamed the dungeon. You're going to stay there, and you're going to live off the canned food and live there. So it's like, okay. So that's kind of that. And these are just like, I'm just giving you small stories of like, because there's so many stories that happen in different locations. So in Delaware, after my mission in Puerto Rico, that's where I was. That was my home. That's where I was embracing. And I just remember being in the dark room with like a little freaking lamp. And it's like, okay, I
That's
didn't know how to live.
aside from the name changes and the expectation of shaving all your hair off, and the not the uniform, but the clothes that you were, well, it is a uniform, I suppose, because if they're the clothes you're given, and everyone's given the same clothes and you're all expected to dress in those clothes only, then it's a uniform, isn't it? There are telltale signs within the things that we've talked about that show a high demand group, but then the shunning of your family and the expectation of you going into solitary confinement and the sleep deprivation and the management of your diet and all of those extra things that you've mentioned here, on top of the coercion, the punishments, that is where the cult like aspects come in. It's not just a high demand religious group that you're looking at when you add all of those extra things into your story. So I'm not surprised that it's a lengthy journey to deconstruct your experiences. Just, trying to answer the question of why you stayed in the chapel for so long must have been difficult to work through, because you probably think now, after having a couple of years of good rest and being around people that genuinely positively support you and having the podcast where you can voice your own thoughts and opinions, why didn't I just say no? But it's not as easy as that.
It's not, because you mean there's just so much trust. I mean, and the athlete, those who are like not, within like the leadership, and those who are just supporters, they're thinking that they're supporting something that is just a devotion, a devotion to pray with the family, and they don't know that once you're deep in, they kind of use you like um as bait. So it's like, now that you're here, you're gonna, if you want to talk to your family, we'll give you permission, but you have to get money.
Do
Or
they
it's like,
take your passports from you when you arrive in a different country?
yeah, that's like the first thing they do. Once you get there, you submit your passports. And not with me, but I know of other, especially with the sisters, where they wanted to leave and their parents were ready to buy the tickets, but they wouldn't give back the passport. It's like, oh, they play stupid. Oh, we don't know where your passport is. And in some cases, like, like especially those from the Philippines, some of them had family here. And in one case, I know of or two cases, I know of sisters who have had their visas torn out, their American visa, and they get their passport back without their American visa. So it makes it harder for them. And now like they can't, like they like one person who I know hasn't seen her mom in America for so long because she can't come here. She doesn't have her visa, and she worked so damn hard, and then she left with the hopes of going to establish a life in America, and only for her to get her passport back without the visa. And it just breaks people down. And it just it's mind-boggling to me that people are pissed off at me for speaking up. But I find that I would rather carry this cross of speaking truth and speaking against abuse than allowing abuse to continue.
That might be one of the most powerful things that anybody has ever said on one of these episodes. That's hugely significant. The money that you were expected to raise once your passport's been taken from you in a country where the native language is not your primary language, I'm guessing that any money that you do manage to raise, you don't get to keep for yourself. So making phone calls home, writing letters home, was that also something that was difficult when you were out of your home country?
Regarding letters, I remember I saw a box in a room, in a storage room, and I was going through it because at that time I was already an elder member. And I saw my name on one of the envelopes, and it was written from my brother, who's the boxer. And I hadn't spoken to him or seen him at this period for like 8 years. And I'm like shaking. So I open it up, and it's dated like a few years back. And it's like, and he probably doesn't. I've asked him about it, and he doesn't remember. It's just so many years ago. But I'm opening it, and he's like, I miss you. Blood is thicker than water. I'm always praying for you. I wish you the best. And I didn't read the whole thing. I closed it up because in my mind, you have these mental blocks that I can't do this because I don't have permission. Because everything, and like going back to the obedience, everything has to have either permission or be given through obedience. And if not, what Father Bing would say is anything done without obedience, the devil can work with that. So in my mind, I'm like, I can't read this. The devil was going to attack me, and he's going to, get my emotions, and I'm going to be in crisis. So I can't allow that to happen. So I didn't read the letter, but communication was very monitored. You would have like a few minutes, and if you do get money, like my parents would send money through Western Union, I would be allowed to go with another brother to the mall or to the they would call it el centro or whatever, and you get your money, you get your $100 in the Filipino pesos, and you give it to the superior, and it's gone. So that's it. Like you never see that money.
I wonder if your reluctance to read the letter that you found, maybe part of you didn't allow yourself to consider what it meant that the people that you were devoting your life to were hiding correspondence from everybody, I imagine. It wouldn't have just been your letters, it must have been other people's as well. So considering that might have been dangerous too, because then what else are they keeping from you? I don't know if that's a dangerous thought process to have, because of course when you're talking about obedience in terms of I can't read this letter, I'm not allowed to read this letter, and this could cause me to have my faith questioned or for me to be considered for punishment. That aside, the obedience in you is like, I can't consider the people that I'm with are anything less than perfect.
Well, there's this fear that if I explore that route, that doom and gloom is going to strike me and my family. And it took a lot of punishment for me to kind of, I guess, have my breaking point. And our punishments, like example, we barely slept, but you're expected to stay awake during prayers, and prayers would be, like I said, from like 1:30 in the morning to like 7 a.m., and you have to have proper posture the whole time. If you're sleepy, we would have like we would call them snipers. So the snipers would like take tally of how many times you dozed off, and or like who's late for prayers, who's late for the schedule. So the whole thing is extremely controlled. It's like freaking being in North Korea. I mean, no offense to North Koreans, but I mean, there's this extreme uh control,
Totalitarian.
totalitarian, golly. And so um they take a tally, and at the end of the prayers, when they're about to announce like the schedule for the rest of the day, or they'll announce the chores, it's like, all right, like the ones who, like the biggest violators of today, let's say Brother Joseph, you were late for rising. Okay, half meal, so they'll take away half of your meal. Okay, you were the sleepiest. Okay, you're gonna get 50 flagellations today. So like we had like a whip, and we have to either whip someone whips you, or you have to whip yourself a bunch of times. And it was like it was a whip, and you just okay,
I
you just
thought you
keep
were
it.
going to say like you'd be on like cleaning the toilet duty or something.
No,
Oh my
no,
goodness,
no.
Ryan.
We'd have to do the flagellations, and sometimes I remember it's like, a brother would come in and be like, "No, I'll take the punishment," because there's this idea like the more you suffer, the more pain you go through, the better, which I think is a distorted vision of Christianity. Because yes, Christ does say pick up your cross, but he doesn't say inflict pain and make people suffer and make people miserable. So I think that that's where this community was interpreting it as a way to give the go signal to do fourth degree and eat crap, to slap the members, to beat the members, to put them in solitary confinement because they had this idea of a twisted theology.
The ritualistic abuse that people during the mass hysteria, which didn't, as far as we know, actually ever happen in the way that people said it did in these underground satanic networks that supposedly existed, where these ritualistic sacrifices were happening. The tools of torture being used in those sacrificial rituals were supposed to be things like what you've just mentioned there with the whips and like the cat o' nine tails and the kind of the belts with the spikes on that puncture the skin when you tighten them. Um,
So what we would do for like the what do you call it, nine tails? I don't even know. We just call it the whip. But yeah, we had like the handle, and you have like different strips, and on the strips, I mean, it's rope, and you make knots. So you have the knots, and then what we would do was like under the candle, you would like kind of melt it, and then it gets. I mean, we don't burn ourselves, but you allow it to melt so that the texture isn't that soft rope. Because once it dries out, it'll have that harder melted feeling to it. So once you're beating yourself with it, you'd really. I mean, my shirts were bloody all the time.
oh my goodness. So you really are talking about the person that can inflict the most pain on themselves is the holiest person they can be. So it's not just the rope. It's then tying the knots into the rope and then slightly burning the rope to change the texture. So you really are kind of just with that one implement thinking of all the different ways that you can exacerbate somebody's pain.
Yeah, so audience, please don't don't be doing this. I hope that the audience don't get no ideas. But yeah, like we would want to, get the most pain, and we'd be and, like we all had knee problems. If you see my knees up to now, there's a bunch of scars because you're kneeling from freaking
Mm.
1:30 to 7, and then you pray again at nighttime from like 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. So it's like constant kneeling, and then with the flagellation, like during Lent, we have to do it. We have to whip ourselves 333 times per day. And I would rather take that than do the fourth degree, which was eat someone
Mm.
else's poop every day. But it's like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. It was a shitty situation to be in. And as I speak about it, I feel this freedom where it's like I'm no longer ruled over by my past. I can have that freedom to talk about it, and I understand that other members, they're they're still frightened, and it's okay to be frightened because that's how I was. But I think that there is always room for hope, and but man, it's one hell of a journey to really deconstruct everything that happened from the beatings, the confinement, the sleep deprivation, all and being lied to.
Now you have your podcast where you offer not only your testimony, but a safe space for other survivors to come forward and offer their experiences as well. I know that you've spoken to Janja Lalich on your platform, which must have been significant for you, not only as a content creator, but also as somebody that is overcoming their own experience in a cultic environment. So just paint that picture for the listeners on how you finally said, I'm not doing this anymore, up until the moment where you decided to launch your podcast.
So when I left, the Vatican was slowly starting to intervene, but I still wasn't getting the help I needed from the superiors. And so what I did was I got a girlfriend, went out, and I mean I took off, I started like wooing a teacher from a college, and so after I took care of business, I think this is this is PG, right? Anyway, so after I took care of business, I came back to the compound, and I told the main superior at that time, like, hey, look, I'm happy for the good run, but it's time for me to hang up my gloves and move on. And the same thing that I've been hearing over the years, it's like, amigo, come on, stay with us. You can be a missionary. We can use you. I mean, you speak Spanish. You have these charming looks, and they were really like love bombing me again. And I'm like, no. I'm like, you guys had me in solitary confinement, and you did all this abuse, and you want me to stay? You want me to be a missionary now after 11 years? It's like, yeah. Like, no, I'm not gonna stick with that.
Wow. So the veil really lifted.
I changed. I mean, after that was my first experience.
Intimacy. I mean, you mentioned that you was kind of 16, 17 at the point that you became involved in this group as well. That's like the height of hormone fluctuation in the body, those your teenage years into your 20s. Chemically, you repressed all of that. So, at the moment where you finally allow yourself to have that intimate experience with another person, I'm not surprised that changed a lot of things for you.
well, for me, because you have to understand that in my mind, I was still like really involved. So for me, it was like a spiritual rape, that I'm in the situation and I'm being violated every day, that I don't want to be there. And to leave, I have to do something that I don't want to do. I don't want to sleep with her. And, people who are listening, who are from my community, I'm sure they're going to be condemning me and saying, oh my gosh, fornicator, grab the stones, and let's stone them to death. That's how they think, from being with Father Being. And so I told the superior, because he asked me, what's the real reason? I'm all like, well, dude, I mean, he wasn't giving me the chance to just freaking leave happily. Yeah. And it's like, all right, dude, I slept with the chick. It's like, oh yeah, we can't have that. No. Okay, so we're kicking you out. I'm like, you're kicking me out? I'm like, I've been trying to leave. I'm like, man, like fuck you, man. All right. So, but after that, like, because the Vatican was getting involved and Father Being was getting less of a say in the community, I felt that there were like those who were leaning with the Vatican weren't treating me as though I were cursed or infested by demons. They were treating me as a person, and I felt that they wanted to work with me to really help the community move forward. But I was still divided after leaving, because it's like part of me is like, oh well, Father Bing is such a holy man. I still didn't want to see the reality of the cover-ups and the corruption and the lies. So like the rule was, after you leave, or the rule they told me, after you leave, keep away from us for at least 6 months to a year, and then, talk, uh, come back and see what we can arrange. So I did that. I went to Australia to be with my brother, stay there for a bit. Then I came to LA. Then I came to Texas, where I am now, just trying to find myself. And while I was here in Texas, it had already been a year that I had been away. So I called Father Jose. Father Jose, the same prick who had me in solitary confinement. And I said, "Hey, look, can I have permission to meet up with you guys? I see that you're having a retreat and I would like to go." And he said, "Sure, come on." So I go there and I get yelled at by the sisters, and it was just a total mess. Mother Agnes called me an asshole for being there. And it was I was just trying to be I was still trying to protect them. You know that syndrome, what's that, Stockholm syndrome? I didn't want to see the reality, but after she called me an asshole, I'm like, "Hey, look, lady, I'm here because I'm just trying to communicate. But why are you looking at me like that?" "Well, because you're an ex member." Okay. Like, look, all I want to do is talk to Father Bing. So I talked to Father Bing, and he tells me, so it's a timed conversation, like 5 minutes. It's all they give me. It's like, "Look, what I want you to do, get an education, become a nurse or something, get a good job. Once you get good money, you can start, helping us and support us. And after that, we'll see how we can use you for our mission with the AFI." And at the time, I'm thinking, all right, that's fine. But then he ended with this, just one more thing. If you say anything if you say anything about what's happened here, that is a very grave sin, and it's something that you shouldn't do because that's gossiping. So that's the last thing he told me. And so after that, I really had that burden that if I say anything, if I share my experiences, I'm gonna go to hell. But then I had that eye opening moment when I was watching Yanya Lalich. Going back, it's a long ass answer, but I'm going back to Yanya Lalich. So I'm watching on Hulu. It's what's that show called? Cult and Extreme Belief.
Yep.
So I'm watching it, and I totally turned into Leonardo DiCaprio. You know that meme where he's like staring he's pointing at the TV screen. I was like, oh my gosh, that's my story. That's my life. All of these different religions, all these different cults were like just ringing bells, in my life. And so I got onto Twitter and I found Yanya Lalich, and like the first 3 retweets she had were the Cult Vault podcast. I'm all like, "Ooh, what's this? I gotta check this out." So I'm eating my Turkish delights. I'm enjoying my time, and I'm going through the Cult Vault. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna listen to this podcast, and I was like, all right, this is amazing, and that helped me say, you know what, screw this. I ain't gonna be silent anymore. I mean, I gotta speak out, and I think your podcast and the other survivors who have the courage to share their story. They say that smiling and laughing is contagious. Well, for me, their courage to be on your podcast, that was contagious, and it spread a fire. And I hope that this fire keeps on spreading so that people can find that healing and find that place to grow. And so that's how I got involved with Yanni Lalich, and that's how I directed my podcast more towards being a platform where I and hopefully future guests can share their truth.
What a journey. What a journey. I mean, you accomplished some of the things you set out to accomplish when you became a part of AFI. You did travel. You did see parts of the world, maybe not in the typical sense of the word travel, because once you arrived in those places, you weren't really allowed to go out much and do much and see much. And you did say in one of your very early episodes, it might have actually even been the first episode on the Truth That Heals podcast, that you were trying to identify the things you struggled with. And one of those was understanding that not 100% of your experience was negative. And that's something that I think a lot of the people on the show who come and talk struggle with identifying. And I think it's incredibly brave and courageous that you've come forward to start your own podcast, because that in itself is to sit in a room on your own and hit the record button and talk to nobody is really, really strange. It feels really uncomfortable and alien. But then to also be so vulnerable and open about your own traumatic and abusive experiences, that's a whole other thing. You must come into contact with some of those triggering problems and memories and issues on a day-to-day basis. What does recovery in deconstruction look like for you right now where you are in life?
Well, like recently I watched that movie, Misery. I'm not sure if you've ever seen it. And it triggers me, but I just love watching it because in the end he gets out of that cage, of that bed. But like I was watching it, yesterday, and it's like triggering in the sense where here's a guy just trying to, write a story, just trying to do what he wants to, like he's just trying to do his job. Kind of like me. I just wanted to be a freaking missionary. And then there's abuse that's happening. And like once that, that abuse is kind of being highlighted, Kathy Bates, the actress, she like flips and she starts saying that, hey, I take care of you, I feed you, I'm doing all these things for you, and this is how you repay me. I mean, I should win an Oscar award for that. But that, watching it, it was triggering where I did feel like once again I'm stuck in my solitary confinement, because like you're just in one spot in the chapel and that's it, and you can't move. And I'm watching it and I feel like this character, and I'm not going to spoil the movie, but like I guess you could say there's a bit of a happy ending. And I know that's just the movie. But in terms of abuse, I think that it's important to, write it down. And even with my interview with Yanya Lalich, she was like talking about having a timeline. And with the character from Misery, he is a writer, so he's able to write. I don't know how the story goes, not to spoil it, but he's able to write so much. And I felt that for me, writing down my experiences was a part of the healing process, and being able to distinguish which things were culty and which things were okay. And there were things that I'll never forget. Like, although many of the superiors were culty and abusive, the brothers that I had in there, and even some of the good sisters, we are even up to now a family. So the way I say it is, I left the cult, but I never left my brothers and sisters. And so that's why I'm going to be traveling to Europe very soon, and reaching out, because they're human beings and they're not cursed, they're not evil people. They're people with emotions, with desires, ambitions. And so I'm very excited for being part of this healing journey and for sharing it, with you and with the world. And I'm ready for the next chapter. Because when I left the community for the first year, after Father Bing pretty much told me to shut the hell up, I spent a year in depression in my room, not wanting to live, because you've been brainwashed so much to think that you're cursed. So I wanted to die. So I would rather be going to Amazon, busting my ass off and doing something with my life than be stuck at home depressed.
The pictures you sent to me as well, you had to explain the smile that you had in each photo, which is quite creepy actually, because it's exactly the same smile in every single photo. And you explained that that's because that was the only emotion that you were allowed to express, otherwise you were sinning. But the smile that you wear now during this interview, it's not that same smile. So I feel like it's an authentic smile, and it's really nice to see it on your face and recognize that hopefully your mental health is in a much better place now than it was when you were in your room during that year of depression.
Oh, it's much better, and it sucks that victims of abuse have to be silenced, and I went through that silence, and I can only imagine, what victims uh, of rape or molestation from priests, how they must feel being silenced and not being believed, and it's just so terrible that people have to go through this alone. And my belief is that it shouldn't be the case. No one should be going through their healing journey on their own.
Well, the Truth That Heals podcast is a show that is hosted by Ryan that you can find on all major podcast platforms. I was listening to it this morning on Apple Podcasts. So I definitely recommend that you go and check that out to gain more of an in-depth look into Ryan's experiences, and also to help push Ryan's podcast up the charts so that we can get it some more recognition, so that we can reach further and wider audiences, so that more people can hear the story and recognize the symptoms and warning signs of cults and coercion in terms of the Catholic Church, because this is not something that's been covered too heavily on the show before. I will put a link to that in the episode description, the Truth That Heals podcast. And that kind of brings us to the end of our episode today. I can't thank you enough, Ryan, for coming on the show and sharing your experiences with everybody. I think I've said this a number of times up to this point now. I think it's incredibly brave and important that we get as many survivor testimonies out into the public realm as possible. So we're not only doing that on this podcast today, but also highlighting the work that you're doing with your own platform. That is incredible work. And I hope that you have the most wonderful time over in Ireland. And I hope that you continue to gather support from fellow survivors from your movement who come forward. And as you said, to take some of your courage to add to the story that you're telling and continue bolstering the survivor community that way. So thank you so much, Ryan, for everything that you do. And thank you for your time
Casey.
today.
Thank you so much. For me, this is like bigger than being on HBO or BBC. This is like, for me, I mean, I don't care what other people think, but I mean, since I started my healing journey, this has been the first cult podcast that I've listened to. So it really has been a huge, for me, this is like winning a championship.
Oh my goodness, that's so funny to me, because I'm just kind of like just Casey, just going about my day, just kind of
Well, that's
but
all the hard work. It's like winning the Premier League that I got to be here. It's like, and to share the testimony of healing.
you're definitely among esteemed company, because every single person that we've had on this show has added to the wealth of knowledge that is now in existence around true experiences that people have lived through in these cultic environments. And also, well, podcasts are just amazing. And I think it's incredible that so many people can just email me and say, "Oh, I was going to go to this yoga retreat, but then I typed in the name of the group on Google and listened to an episode of your show, and now I've decided not to, pay a year's subscription up front," or whatever wild story it is. So amazing work. Brilliant. So thank you so much, Ryan, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Casey. You have a
Take
good day.
care. Bye.